The holographic display flickered to life in the center of the United Earth Council chamber, casting an eerie blue glow across the faces of humanity's most powerful leaders. The alien figure that materialized was both beautiful and terrifying tall, with crystalline skin that seemed to shift between colors, and eyes that held the cold intelligence of a species that had conquered 1,000 worlds. "I am Zephyra, voice of the Galactic Triumvirate," the figure spoke, its voice carrying harmonics that made the humans' teeth ache. "We have observed your species for exactly 1 of your years. Your expansion into what you call the solar system has been noted." President Chen of the United Earth Council leaned forward, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the conference table. Round her, the representatives of Earth's major powers sat in stunned silence. This was humanity's first contact with alien intelligence, and it wasn't going as anyone had hoped. "Your kind shows promise," Zephyra continued, its form shifting slightly as if it were a living hologram. "Primitive promise, but promise nonetheless. However, your recent ventures beyond your home system have caused concern among the established powers." Admiral Sarah Martinez, Earth's highest-ranking military officer, stood slowly. Her voice was steady, but those who knew her could hear the underlying tension. What kind of concern? The alien's expression, if it could be called that, remained unchanged. The concern of order, the concern of hierarchy, the concern of knowing one's place in the cosmic order. It paused, letting the words sink in. "Humanity has reached a crossroads. You may continue to exist, to thrive even, but within the boundaries we set for you. Your expansion ends here. Your exploration ends now." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's leading xenobiologist, leaned forward. "And if we refuse, then you cease to exist." Zephyr replied with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. "We have seen this choice presented to over 300 species. 297 chose compliance. They still exist today, happy in their designated sectors, contributing to the greater galactic community under our guidance." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. President Chen's voice cracked slightly as she asked, "And the other 3? Their worlds are beautiful monuments now, crystalline gardens where one civilization stood. Very peaceful, very orderly." The hologram flickered, and for a moment, images flashed across the display worlds of impossible beauty, with towering crystal spires and perfectly manicured landscapes. But there was something unsettling about their perfection, something that spoke of death rather than life. "You have 72 of your hours to decide," Zephyra announced. "A delegation will arrive at your moon's orbit to receive your answer. Choose wisely, humans. The universe is vast, but it has no room for chaos." The hologram vanished, leaving the chamber in darkness except for the emergency lighting. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Admiral Martinez slammed her fist on the table. "Well, that's just great. Our first alien contact, and it's an ultimatum." President Chen looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leaders. Some showed fear, others anger, but all showed the same grim determination that had carried humanity through its darkest hours. "How long until our deep space monitoring stations can give us more information about these triumvirate ships?" "Already working on it," came a voice from the back of the room. Commander Jake Thompson, head of the Earth Defense Forces Intelligence Division, was hunched over a tablet, his fingers flying across the display. "But President Chen, there's something else. Our long-range sensors have been picking up massive energy signatures just beyond the edge of our solar system. Whatever's coming, it's big." Dr. Vasquez stood, her scientific mind already working through the implications. 300 species, they said. That suggests a galactic empire of unprecedented scale. But the question isn't about their power, it's about their psychology. They're offering us a choice, which means they believe we might be useful alive, or they're just playing with their food, Admiral Martinez muttered. "No," Dr. Vasquez shook her head. "If they wanted us dead, we'd already be dead. They want something from us, or they believe we can provide something. The question is, what?" President Chen stood, her voice carrying the weight of command that had seen Earth through the climate wars and the resource conflicts. "I want options, people. military options, diplomatic options, and anything else we can think of. We have 72 hours to decide the fate of our species. As the leaders filed out of the chamber, each lost in their own thoughts. None of them noticed the small device that had been quietly recording everything from its hiding spot in the ventilation system. Nor did they see the figure in the shadows of the observation deck above, watching them with eyes that held secrets of their own. The countdown to humanity's choice had begun, but humanity was about to discover that some choices create their own alternatives. Chapter 2. The gathering stormed deep beneath the Swiss Alps. In a facility that officially didn't exist, Dr. Marcus Webb stared at screens filled with data that shouldn't have been possible. The Prometheus project had been humanity's most classified program, a desperate attempt to push the boundaries of physics itself. Now, with alien ultimatums hanging over their heads, it might be their only hope. The energy readings are off the charts. Dr. Sarah Kim, Webb's lead physicist, called out from across the laboratory. If these calculations are right, we're looking at a fleet of ships that could each individually crack a planet in half. Webb rubbed his eyes, exhaustion weighing on him like a physical force. They've been working nonstop since the alien message had been received 12 hours ago. What about the defensive capabilities? That's the thing, Kim replied, her voice tight with controlled excitement. They're not just powerful, they're efficient. Too efficient. It's like they're using technologies that bend the normal rules of physics. Which means, Webb asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Which means we might not be as outgunned as we think. Before Webb could respond, the laboratory's secure communications system crackled to life. President Chen's voice filled the room, tinged with urgency. Dr. Webb, I need a status report on Project Prometheus. Now. Webb exchanged glances with his team. They'd all signed oaths that carried the death penalty for breaking them. But with humanity's survival at stake, those oaths suddenly seemed less important than the data scrolling across their screens. Madam President, Webb began carefully, I'm going to share something with you that will either save us all or get us all killed. Prometheus isn't just a research project, it's a weapon. And based on what we're seeing from these alien ships, it might actually work. Meanwhile, on the far side of the Earth, in a military installation buried beneath the Australian outback, Admiral Martinez was having her own crisis of conscience. The room around her was filled with the soft hum of computers and the occasional beep of incoming data. Banks of monitors showed the positions of Earth's military assets, and the picture they painted was not encouraging. Admiral Captain Rebecca Torres, her aide-de-camp, approached with a tablet in her hands. The latest intelligence reports from our deep space monitoring stations. Martinez took the tablet and scrolled through the data. Her expression grew grimmer with each passing second. How many ships? Conservative estimate, 50. Realistic estimate, over 100. And that's just the advance force. Jesus Christ, Martinez whispered. How do we fight something like that? Maybe we don't, Torres replied quietly. Maybe we find another way. Martinez looked up at her aide sharply. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that sometimes the best way to win a war is to make sure it never starts. Torres activated a wall display, showing a three-dimensional map of the solar system. We've been thinking about this all wrong. They're not just threatening us, they're testing us. The question is, what kind of test is it? Above them, in the inhabited space stations orbiting Earth, a different kind of preparation was taking place. Marcus Chen, no relation to the president, floated in the zero-gravity workshop of Station Alpha, his hands working with the practiced precision of someone who'd spent his entire adult life in space. Hand me that neural interface, he called to his partner, Dr. Lisa Park. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. Park pushed off from the wall and glided over with the requested component. Marcus, are you sure about this? The integration process hasn't been tested on humans. The integration process hasn't been tested on anyone. Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. But if these aliens think they know what humans are capable of, they're about to get a very unpleasant surprise. The device they were working on looked innocuous enough, a small, crystalline structure about the size of a baseball. But Park knew that appearances could be deceiving. This little device contained technology that had been reverse-engineered from a meteorite that had crashed in Siberia 6 months ago, a meteorite that Earth's governments had classified at the highest levels, and which had led to the development of technologies that pushed the boundaries of what should have been possible. Neural interfaces ready, Park announced. But Marcus, once we do this, there's no going back. The integration will be permanent. Marcus paused in his work and looked out the viewport at the Earth below. Somewhere down there, humanity's leaders were wrestling with an impossible choice. But up here, in the silence of space, he and Park were working on something that might give humanity a third option. Lisa, he said quietly, I've been thinking about what that alien said. About 300 species, and only 3 that chose to fight. What about it? What if they weren't destroyed because they chose to fight? What if they were destroyed because they fought poorly? Park felt a chill run down her spine. You think this is some kind of test? I think, Marcus replied, turning back to his work, that we're about to find out what humans are really capable of. And I don't think these aliens are going to like what they discover. As if summoned by his words, the station's communication system activated with the distinctive chime that indicated a priority. Message from Earth. President Chen's voice filled the workshop. All personnel, this is President Chen, as of 1800 hours Earth Standard Time. I am authorizing the activation of all classified defense protocols. Project Prometheus is now operational. Project Mindbridge is now operational. And to our people in the outer system, Project Exodus is now operational. We have been given an ultimatum, but we are not without options. Stand by for further instructions, Marcus. And Park looked at each other, understanding passing between them without words. Humanity had been preparing for this moment longer than anyone realized. The question now was whether they prepared well enough. In the darkness of space, far beyond the orbit of Pluto, something stirred. Ancient monitoring stations, dormant for millennia, suddenly came online. Deep within the asteroid belt, mining operations that had been disguised as routine resource extraction began to reveal their true purpose, and in the depths of Earth's oceans, in facilities that existed in the deepest trenches where no light had ever penetrated, machines that had been quietly building themselves for decades finally reached completion. The aliens had asked for humanity's limits. They were about to discover that humanity had been preparing to exceed them. Chapter 3. The Revelation Triumvirate delegation arrived precisely 72 hours after Zephyr's ultimatum, their ships materializing in lunar orbit like silver tears in the fabric of space itself, 3 vessels, each one a work of art that seemed to bend light around its hull, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. On the bridge of the lead ship, Zephyr stood before a holographic display, showing Earth in all its blue and white glory. Beside her, 2 other figures observed the planet with the detached interest of scientists studying a particularly interesting specimen. The humans have been quite active, observed Kethmer, the military commander of the delegation. His species was more traditionally intimidating than Zephyr's at all, with chitinous armor that seemed to grow from his skin and eyes that glow with an inner fire. Our sensors detect significant energy buildups across their system. Let them play, replied Vex High, the 3rd member of the delegation. Where Zephyr was beautiful and Kethmer was imposing, Vex High was unsettling, a creature that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. With parts of its body fading and out of visible reality, it will make their submission more educational. Zephyr's crystalline features shifted slightly, the closest thing to a frown her species could manage. Something troubles you? Vex High asked, its voice carrying harmonics that existed in frequencies beyond human perception. They are different from the others, Zephyr replied slowly. The other species we've encountered, they either submitted immediately or fought with the weapons they already possessed. These humans, they've been preparing. Preparing for what? Kethmer asked, his warrior instincts stirring. They've barely achieved interplanetary travel. What could they possibly prepare that would threaten the Triumvirate? Before Zephyr could answer, their ship's communication system activated. A human voice, speaking in carefully pronounced Galactic standard, filled the bridge. Triumvirate vessel, this is President Chen of the United Earth Council. We are ready to provide our response to your ultimatum. The three aliens exchanged glances. It was unusual for a species to learn their language so quickly, but not unprecedented. Zephyr activated the communication link. Speak your choice, human leader. There was a pause, and then Chen's voice came through again. But this time it carried a tone that made all three aliens pay closer attention. We choose option 4. There is no option 4. Vex-High replied, its multi-dimensional form rippling. With what might have been amusement, there is submission, resistance, or extinction. Those are the only choices the universe offers. Then came a new voice. One that none of them recognized. You haven't been paying attention to the universe. The holographic display around them suddenly flickered, and for a moment, the aliens found themselves looking not at Earth, but at something impossible. It was space. But not space as they understood it. This was deeper, older, filled with structures that shouldn't exist and energies that defied their understanding of physics. What is this? Kethmer demanded, his weapon systems automatically activating. This, the unknown voice replied, is what happens when a species refuses to accept limitations. The display shifted again, and now they were looking at Earth's solar system, but from a perspective that revealed things their sensors had somehow missed. The asteroid belt wasn't just a collection of rocks, it was a construction site, with massive structures hidden within the larger asteroids, the outer. Planets weren't just gas giants, they were surrounded by installations that had been disguised as natural phenomena. Impossible, Zephyr whispered. Our sensors would have detected such constructions. Your sensors detected what we wanted them to detect, the voice replied. Did you really think that in the 72 hours since your ultimatum, we built all of this? We've been preparing for you for over a decade. A decade? Vex-High's form rippled with confusion. But this is first contact. How could you have known? The answer came not from the mysterious voice, but from a figure that materialized on their bridge, not a hologram, but an actual human being, standing in the middle of their most secure command center as if he'd been there all along. The human was tall, with prematurely gray hair and eyes that held depths that seemed almost alien. He wore a simple black uniform with no insignia, and when he spoke, his voice carried the same harmonics that had been coming through their communication system. Because, he said quietly, this isn't humanity's first contact with alien intelligence. It's just the first time we've admitted it. Kethmer's weapons were trained on the human instantly. But the man didn't seem concerned. My name is Thomas Carter, and I'm what you might call humanity's secret weapon. I'm also proof that your 300 species statistic is wrong. Some of us have been part of the galactic community for a lot longer than you realize. Zephyr's crystalline form shifted through several colors before settling on a deep purple. That indicated extreme agitation. You're claiming to be a hybrid. I'm claiming to be something that your triumvirate didn't account for, Carter replied. I'm claiming to be what happens when a species refuses to stay within the boundaries you set for them, and I'm claiming to be the reason that humanity is about to rewrite the rules of your little galactic empire. Even if what you claim is true, Vex-High interjected, its multi-dimensional form rippling with what might have been anger. You are still only one individual, one ship, one planet. We are the triumvirate. We control 3/4 of the galaxy, Carter smiled, and there was something in that expression that made all three aliens take an involuntary step backward. Are you sure about that? The holographic display activated again, but this time it showed something that made the aliens' blood run cold. It was a map of the galaxy, but not as they knew it. Scattered throughout the spiral arms were markers, hundreds of them, thousands of them, each one indicating a world that was supposed to be under triumvirate control. What are those? Zephyr asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Those, Carter replied, are the worlds that have been waiting for someone to make the first move. The worlds that submitted to your ultimatum not because they were afraid, but because they were buying time. The worlds that have been preparing, just like we have, for the day when someone would finally say no to the triumvirate. The display zoomed in on one of the markers. revealing a world that the Triumvirate had conquered over a century ago. But now, instead of the ordered, crystal cities that marked Triumvirate control, they could see massive industrial complexes, ship construction, facilities, and defense installations that rivaled anything in the core worlds. Impossible, Kethmer breathed. Our monitoring stations would have detected such activities. Your monitoring stations, Carter said, have been feeding you false data for over 50 years. Did you really think that species advanced enough to achieve interstellar travel would just give up, that they would accept submission without thinking of alternatives? Vexaya's form was now rippling violently, its multidimensional nature becoming unstable. Even if this is true, even if some worlds have been preparing in secret, you cannot stand against the full might of the Triumvirate. Our fleet's number in the millions. Our weapons can destroy star systems. Your fleets, Carter replied, are about to discover that they're not the only ones with system-killing weapons. And your weapons are about to meet technologies that you've never encountered before, developed by species that have had centuries to think about how to defeat you. As if summoned by his words, the space around the Triumvirate ships began to ripple, not with the distortion of their own technology, but with something else, something that made their advanced sensors scream warnings they'd never been programmed to recognize. What have you done? Zephyr demanded. Carter's smile widened. We've done what no species has ever done before. We've united the galaxy against you. And now, we're going to show you what happens when a species refuses to accept its place in your cosmic order. The ripples in space intensified, and suddenly the three Triumvirate ships found themselves surrounded by a fleet that shouldn't exist. Ships of designs they'd never seen, utilizing technologies that defied their understanding of physics, crewed by species that were supposed to be safely contained in their designated sectors. You asked for our limits, Carter said, his voice now carrying harmonics that resonated through dimensions the Triumvirate had never imagined. Now witness them, and in that moment, as the balance of galactic power shifted forever, the three aliens realized that they had made a fatal error. They had assumed that submission meant acceptance. They had assumed that compliance meant defeat. And they had assumed that 300 species would stay conquered forever. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Chapter 4. The War of Liberation. The first shot of the war wasn't fired by humanity, but by a species the Triumvirate had thought extinct for over 2 centuries. The Kethani had been one of the first to face the ultimatum, one of the first to choose resistance, and supposedly one of the first to be eliminated. But as energy beams of impossible intensity lanced out from ships that materialized like ghosts from the void, it became clear that the Kethani had been playing a very long game. Impossible. Kethmer breathed, his chitinous armor rippling with shock. We glassed their homeworld. We watched it burn. You glassed a world, Carter corrected, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of hidden truth. You destroyed cities, civilian populations, infrastructure, but you never found their military. You never found their fleets, and you never found their real colonies. The space around the Triumvirate delegation erupted into chaos. Ships that had been hidden in the quantum foam between dimensions suddenly became visible, their weapons already charging. Some designs were sleek and organic, others were brutal and angular, but all of them shared one common feature. They were built for war against the Triumvirate. Vexaya's multidimensional form flickered violently as it processed information that its species' greatest minds had deemed impossible. The energy signatures. These aren't just advanced weapons. They're using technologies that shouldn't exist. Technologies that wouldn't exist, Carter agreed, if 300 species hadn't had centuries to share their knowledge, to combine their sciences, to build something greater than the sum of their parts. On the bridge of the lead human ship, President Chen watched the unfolding battle with a mixture of awe and terror around her. The command crew worked with the precise efficiency of people who had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. Admiral Martinez, Chen called out, "What's our status?" "All systems are green," Martinez replied from her position at the tactical station. "The neural interface is functioning perfectly. Our pilots are fully synchronized with the quantum navigation systems. And the Prometheus weapon? Charging. Now, Dr. Webb estimates another 30 seconds until full power. Chen nodded, then activated her communication link to the triumvirate ships, Zephyra. This is your final warning. Order your fleets to stand down, acknowledge the independence of all previously conquered worlds, and withdraw to your core systems. This is the only offer you will receive. The response came not from Zephyra, but from a voice that spoke with the authority of millennia of absolute power. I am Overlord Kethvash, Supreme Commander of the Triumvirate Enforcement Fleet. You have 30 seconds to surrender, before we demonstrate why 300 species chose submission over extinction. The space around Earth's solar system suddenly filled with ships, not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands upon thousands of vessels, their hulls gleaming with the silver perfection of triumvirate technology. They appeared in perfect formation, their weapons already locked onto targets throughout the system. Jesus Christ. Admiral Martinez whispered, "Where did they all come from? Quantum displacement drives." Carter replied from his position on the alien bridge, "They've been hiding in parallel dimensions, waiting for the order to attack." He looked at the three aliens who had started this confrontation. Impressive. But you're still thinking too small. Too small? Zephyr's crystalline form had shifted to deep red, indicating maximum alert status. That fleet contains more firepower than most species have ever dreamed of. It could reduce your entire system to cosmic dust. I don't doubt it, Carter replied calmly. But you're still thinking in terms of single systems, single battles. You haven't grasped the true scope of what's happening here. As if summoned by his words, the space around the triumvirate fleet began to distort, not with the arrival of more ships, but with something far more significant. The very fabric of space-time began to ripple, and through those ripples came something that made both sides pause in their preparations for battle. It was a structure, or perhaps a being, that existed on a scale that dwarfed even the massive triumvirate fleet. It stretched across light years, its form shifting and changing as it moved through dimensions that had names only in the most advanced physics textbooks. "What is that?" Overlord Kethvash demanded, his voice carrying the first hint of uncertainty. "The triumvirate had shown that," Carter replied, "is what happens when a species refuses to accept physical limitations. Meet the Transcendents, the original inhabitants of this galaxy, the ones who built the quantum pathways you use for faster-than-light travel, the ones who've been watching your little empire expand for the past million years." The massive entity spoke, its voice resonating through dimensions that made the strongest triumvirate shields useless. "Children of the void, you have grown arrogant in your power. You have forgotten the first law of existence." "What law?" Kethvash asked, though his fleet was already beginning to withdraw to a safer distance. "The law of evolution," the entity replied. "All species must grow, must change, must transcend their limitations. You have sought to prevent this. You have broken the fundamental covenant of existence." Carter turned to face the three aliens on the bridge. "You see, you made a critical error when you built your empire. You assumed that technological advancement was the only form of evolution that mattered. But some species, like the Transcendents, evolved beyond the need for physical form. Others, like humanity, evolved beyond the need for individual consciousness." "What are you talking about?" Vexhai demanded, its multidimensional form rippling with confusion. "I'm talking about the fact that I'm not just Thomas Carter," he replied. "I'm not just one person. I'm a collective consciousness, a merger of human and alien minds that has been preparing for this moment for over a century. And I'm not the only one. Across the solar system, in locations that the triumvirate had never detected, other figures like Carter began to make themselves known. Some were human. Others were from species that had supposedly been extinct for centuries. All of them shared the same deep, knowing eyes, the same harmonics in their voices, the same absolute confidence in the face of impossible odds. We are the synthesis." Carter continued, his voice now echoing from dozens of locations simultaneously. "We are what happens when species refuse to accept the limitations you impose. We are the result of centuries of hidden cooperation, shared knowledge, and combined evolution. The triumvirate fleet found itself facing not just the combined military might of 300 supposedly conquered species, but something far more dangerous, a new form of existence. That rendered their entire philosophy obsolete. You cannot defeat us, Overlord Kefvash declared, though his voice carried less certainty than before. We are the rightful rulers of this galaxy. We have maintained order for over 1,000,000 years. Order, Carter repeated, and there was something like pity in his voice. You've maintained stagnation. You've prevented growth. You've turned 300 species into living museums of what they once were. He gestured to the massive entity, still looming over the battlefield. But evolution finds a way. Life finds a way. And now, the galaxy is ready to move beyond your limited vision of what's possible. The entity spoke again, its voice causing ripples in space-time that made even the most advanced triumvirate sensors struggle to maintain coherence. The children have chosen to grow. The synthesis will guide them. Your time as shepherds is ended. And if we refuse? Zephyra asked, her crystalline form now cycling through colors that indicated extreme distress. Then you'll discover what happened to the species that came before you, Carter replied. The ones who built the first galactic empire, who thought they could control evolution itself. The ones whose monuments still drift in the space between galaxies. Beautiful and empty and utterly forgotten. The threat hung in the space between them like a physical thing. The triumvirate fleet, for all its power, suddenly seemed very small in the face of forces that operated on cosmic scales. You're offering us the same choice you gave those 300 species. Kethma realized, submit or face extinction. No, Carter corrected. We're offering you the choice to evolve, to become part of something greater than your individual species, to transcend the limitations you've imposed on yourselves. He smiled, and in that expression was both compassion and absolute determination. But if you choose to remain what you are, to continue preventing others from growing, then yes, you'll discover what extinction looks like for a species that refuses to change. The standoff stretched across space and time, two visions of the future facing each other across the void. On one side, the triumvirate's vision of order, control, and stagnation. On the other, the synthesis's vision of growth, change, and transcendence. The choice, as always, was theirs to make. But this time, the consequences of that choice would reshape the galaxy itself. Epilogue. The new galactic order 6 months. After the confrontation in Earth's solar system, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The triumvirate's million-year empire had crumbled not through conquest, but through mass defection. Species after species had revealed their hidden preparations, their secret alliances, their long-suppressed desire for growth and change. On the planet that had once been the triumvirate's capital, Zephyr stood in what had once been the council chamber of absolute order, looking out at a city that was transforming itself before her eyes. The rigid, crystalline structures that had defined triumvirate architecture for millennia were being replaced by organic forms that seemed to grow rather than be built. Streets that had run in perfect geometric patterns now curved and flowed like rivers, and everywhere, beings from dozens of species worked together on projects that would have been impossible under the old order. It's beautiful, she said, her crystalline form now shifting through colors that indicated wonder rather than distress. I never imagined it could be like this. Carter, or the being that had once been Carter, stood beside her, his form now less human than it had been during the confrontation. The synthesis had continued to evolve, incorporating not just human and alien minds, but patterns of thought that transcended individual species entirely. It's just the beginning, he replied, his voice carrying harmonics that spoke of vast possibilities. The transcendents have shown us pathways we never imagined, technologies that work with evolution rather than against it, ways of being that don't require the suppression of others. And the other members of the triumvirate? Zephyr asked. Though she already knew the answer, Kethmer chose to join the synthesis. His warrior instincts are being channeled into protecting the young civilizations that are just beginning to explore the galaxy. Vex High. Carter paused, a smile playing at the edges of his transformed features. Vexhide discovered that existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously is nothing compared to existing in multiple states of consciousness. The last I heard, they were helping to establish new forms of art that exist in 7 dimensions. Zephyr's form shifted to deep blue, indicating thoughtful contemplation. And what of the species that chose to remain as they were? Not all of them wanted to evolve. They're free to remain as they are, Carter replied. That's the difference between the old order and the new one. We don't force change on anyone, but we also don't prevent it. The galaxy is vast enough for all forms of existence, even the triumvirate, Zephyr asked. Even the triumvirate. Carter confirmed. There are still core worlds where the old order is maintained, where beings can live in the structured, predictable existence you once provided. But they're no longer empires. They're simply choices, as if summoned by their conversation. The air around them shimmered, and President Chen materialized in the chamber. But like Carter, she had changed. Her form was still recognizably human, but now it carried elements of other species that enhanced perception of the Kethani. The dimensional awareness of the Vexhai, the crystalline clarity of Zephyr's own people. The new colonies are reporting remarkable progress, she announced, her voice carrying the joy of someone who had seen impossible dreams made real. The Andromeda expedition has made contact with civilizations that have been waiting for contact for millions of years. The deep space exploration teams have discovered structures that suggest that transcendents aren't the only post-physical species in the universe. And Earth, Zephyr asked, curious about the world that had started this transformation. Chen's smile could have powered a small sun. Earth is finally living up to its potential. The barriers between nations dissolved when we realized we were all part of something infinitely larger. The environmental damage is healing faster than we ever thought possible now that we understand how to work with natural systems rather than against them. And the children. She paused, her expression becoming almost reverent. The children are being born with capabilities we can barely comprehend. They're the first generation to grow up in a universe without artificial limits. What about the other species? Zephyr asked. The ones that had been conquered for so long that they'd forgotten what they were capable of? They're remembering, Carter replied. It turns out that suppression doesn't destroy capability, it just forces it underground. The Kethani have rediscovered their mastery of quantum mechanics. The Vexhai are teaching others how to exist in multiple dimensions. The Zephyrin, he looked at Zephyra with something like admiration. The Zephyrin are creating technologies that turn thoughts into reality. And the synthesis itself, Zephyr asked, what are its limits? Carter's form flickered. And for a moment, she glimpsed something vast and complex, a network of consciousness that spanned galaxies. That incorporated not just the thoughts of individuals but the collective dreams of entire species. We're still discovering that, he admitted. Every day, we become something new. Every day, we transcend what we thought was possible. The chamber fell silent for a moment, each being lost in contemplation of the magnitude of what had been accomplished. Then Zephyr spoke, her voice carrying a note of something the triumvirate had never allowed itself to feel. Hope, there's something I need to tell you, she said, her crystalline form shifting to colors that indicated both shame and determination. The triumvirate, we weren't the first galactic empire. We were just the most recent. Carter and Chen exchanged glances, their enhanced senses immediately picking up the significance of this revelation. What do you mean? Chen asked. The technologies we used, the ships, the dimensional displacement drives, we didn't develop them, we found them in the ruins of civilizations that had fallen before us. Zephyr's form began to pulse with a rhythm that spoke of deep emotional conflict. We told ourselves we were maintaining order, preventing the chaos that had destroyed our predecessors. But the truth is, we were afraid. Afraid of what? Carter asked gently. Afraid of what we might become if we allowed ourselves to grow beyond our limitations. Afraid of the responsibility that came with true power. Afraid of making the same mistakes that had led to the fall of the empires before us. She looked out at the transforming city, at the beings of dozens of species working together on projects That defied the old understanding of what was possible. We chose stagnation because we thought it was safer than evolution. And now, Chen asked. Now, Zephyr replied, her form brightening with colors that spoke of courage and resolve. Now I understand that stagnation is the only true death. Everything else is just transformation. As if responding to her words, the air around them shimmered. Again, and the massive presence of the transcendent entity made itself known. But this time, instead of the overwhelming force that had appeared during the confrontation, it manifested as something more approachable, a shifting pattern of light, an energy that spoke directly to their enhanced consciousness. The child speaks wisdom, the entity said, its voice now carrying tones of approval and encouragement. The fear of change is the beginning of entropy. The embrace of evolution is the path to transcendence. What happened to the empires that came before? Carter asked. The ones whose technologies the triumvirate inherited. They chose different paths, the entity replied. Some sought to preserve themselves by preventing all change. They became static, perfect, and ultimately irrelevant. Others sought to accelerate evolution beyond all limits. They transcended physical existence so completely that they could nitrogen monoxide longer interact with the material universe. In the synthesis, Chen asked, what path are we choosing? The path of balance, the entity responded. The path of growth that remembers its origins. The path of transcendence that remains connected to the universe it seeks to understand. The entity's presence began to fade, but not before leaving them with a final message. The galaxy awaits your guidance. Other galaxies await your friendship. The universe itself awaits your contributions to the endless dance of existence. As the transcendent presence departed, the three beings stood in comfortable silence, each processing the weight of what they had learned and what lay ahead. Finally, Zephyr spoke. So what happens now? Where do we go from here? Carter's form stabilized into something that was recognizably human, though enhanced by the knowledge and capabilities of dozens of species. Now, he said, we do what humanity has always done when faced with the unknown. We explore, we learn, we grow, and we help others do the same. The Andromeda expedition is already reporting contact with civilizations that have been waiting for someone to reach out across the void, Chen added. The deep space explorers have found evidence of structures that suggest the universe is far older and more complex than we ever imagined. And every day, we're discovering new ways to exist, new forms of consciousness, new possibilities for what life can become. It sounds overwhelming, Zephyr admitted. It is. Carter replied with a smile. But that's what makes it wonderful. For the first time in our species' history, we're not limited by what we think is possible. We're limited only by our willingness to imagine something greater. Outside the chamber, the transformed city continued its metamorphosis. Organic spires reaching toward the stars while transportation networks flowed like rivers of light. In the distance, ships of designs that had never existed before prepared for journeys to places that had never been explored. And throughout it all, beings of countless species worked together on projects that would have been impossible. Under the old order, the galaxy had been reborn, not through conquest or destruction, but through the simple recognition that growth was not only possible but necessary. The Triumvirate's million-year empire had ended not with a bang, but with a transformation that touched every corner of known space. And in that transformation, humanity had discovered its true purpose, not to dominate the galaxy, but to help it evolve, not to impose their will upon the universe, but to participate in its endless dance of change and growth. The limits had been tested, transcended, and ultimately revealed to be nothing more than self-imposed boundaries. The galaxy was infinite. Possibilities were endless, and for the first time in eons, every species was free to discover what they might become. The age of stagnation was over. The age of transcendence had begun, and it was only the beginning. Asterisk in the depths of space, far beyond the reach of even the most advanced sensors. Ancient monitoring stations registered the change. Across the universe, other galaxies took notice. As the ripples of transformation spread outward at speeds that defied the laws of physics, and in dimensions that existed beyond the comprehension of any single species. Beings that had transcended matter itself nodded in approval as another corner of existence. Chose evolution over entropy. The humans had asked to witness limits. Instead, they had chosen to eliminate them entirely. And the universe would never be the same.